wa barakatuh. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us to meet again on the best day of the week, Friday, because of Jumu'ah, as the Prophet ﷺ has taught us. Inna alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu, wa na'udhu billahi min shuri anfusina wa sayyiati a'malina. Faman yahdillah fala mudilla lahu, faman yudlil fala hadiya lahu. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Amma ba'd. There's so many things that are going on in society right now. The COVID-19, but what is taking the forefront, more so than anything else now, is the circumstance and the demonstrations and everything surrounding and with the circumstance of George Floyd and his being murdered and being put on blast, to use that word, that everybody saw, and the demonstrations and everything that has taken place from it. And the question becomes, what's the position that we as Muslims take? In this situation, what is it that we are supposed to do? And so just for a few minutes, I would like to address that issue in terms of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his sublimeness and his all-encompassing wisdom has said to us, not only in terms of how it is that we are to conduct ourselves in terms of a particular situation like we're dealing with now, but as how we are to conduct ourselves as Muslims, striving to reach that classification of mu'min, believer. And here it doesn't, I'm not saying that as Muslims we do not believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In that case, in being Muslim, we are. But within the context of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he talks about the mu'mineen and the mu'minat, the believers, men and women, and characterizes them as to what they do and what they don't do. Okay? And so we want to take a look at that and see what is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about us in terms of the Quran, and what is it that we should be aspiring to all the time, but in particular in the circumstances that we are confronted about now, because of a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes what could be called the Muslim Ummah, or those who have put forth and testified their belief in him. And we want to take a look at that. And before I go any farther, let me say, as you as my witnesses, that anything that I say is correct from the Quran and the Sunnah, is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And any mistakes that I made are because of my own shortcomings and my fault. And I would ask for Allah's forgiveness as well as yours. I'm about to continue. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that there are certain things that we should do. And what we want to look at is what he tells us in describing us. He says to us in the Quran that for those of us who profess belief in him, we are the best that have been raised amongst all mankind. And he describes this description to us because we enjoin the right and we forbid the wrong. That we are just in our dealings with each other as Muslim brothers and sisters, and we're just with anyone, even outside of the deen, that we deal with. He also says to us that indeed, keeping this command of being just is one that we can never give up or get away from. And it involves the issue of taqwa. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and as the Prophet Saiful-Islam taught, the only way to get honor with Allah is through taqwa. Not because of our lineage, not because of how much wealth we have, not because of the color of our skin, not because we're male or female, but because of taqwa. That is the only way to gain honor with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he describes us, as the Prophet Saiful-Islam said, and from the Quran, we have been raised as the best amongst all mankind because we believe in Allah, we believe in his prophets, all of them who came, with the final one being Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we enjoin the right and we forbid the wrong for no other reason except seeking Allah's pleasure. And that in this, we become the best example for all of mankind in what their Creator is demanding of them. So in light of what we're doing now and the circumstance of what we're doing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also tells us about being just and being honest. And from the Tafsir of Ibn Kathir, the lessons are pretty clear. One, he tells us, do not give testimony less than what is true because of a person being poor or of them being rich, or from what tribe they came from as such. And this is one of the things that changed the society in time of the Prophet ﷺ, because he said to them, your lineage, where you come from, how much wealth you have now, that's not the most important thing. And it should never be a circumstance about delivering the truth. And with us today in this circumstance that is happening, we have to decide where we're going to be. Will we sit on the lines and be quiet on the sidelines? Or will we become involved in rectifying the things that are wrong for this society that we live in, whether locally or nationally, but doing it from the standpoint of our being Muslim, it being from the standpoint that we know the truth. We can't sit by the sidelines and let someone speak for us. When I began to learn about the history of Masjidun-Nur, and from the things that Talia has told me, and from Brother Naeem and others, about the things that you all did and accomplished at 910 Broadway before the fire, that changed the area and the neighborhood that you were in, and that people now in Camden still talk about the legacy of the Muslims from Masjidun-Nur and what you accomplished. The aspect of demonstrating, going out on the street, doing Ramadan, and doing those things to draw attention to what was wrong, in essence, enjoining the right and forbidding the wrong, purely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the victories that came from that. And I know I may be sort of preaching to the choir, because what I'm talking about, most of you there who are listening, you were involved in it, you did it. So you know what enjoining the right and forbidding the wrong for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do. Because we see the injustices highlighted not only by George Floyd, but others who have died, even since his death, from the systematic aspect of racism in this country. And we know from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he tells us in the Quran that in creating humankind, he created mankind from Adam and Hawa, and Eve is her name in English translation. And he sent men and women all over the earth. And in doing so, we know that he also told us from the Quran, and I will give you the ayats from the Quran, that indeed in creating us, that our color means nothing. Our lineage means nothing in the sight of He who created us. That the best amongst us are those who fear Allah the most. And this is where it becomes important, if I'm issuing a call to action for myself and for you, in Allah having said this in the Quran, in Surah Al-Hujurat, 49th Surah, and He talks about the fact of the 113th ayat, how we were created, as I just quoted. He says the best of us are those who fear Him the most, taqwa. But He says something else that we must pay close attention to, because He also says, in essence, the Jews and the Christians, the people of the scripture, Ahl Kitab, they had their chance. They had their chance. And they didn't. They fell short. They went away from enjoining the right and forbidding the wrong. And this is not where we want to be. No matter what the circumstance is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding us, be just, be truthful. Even if it means in a circumstance of us testifying against ourselves. As much as we would fear something coming bad out of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about Himself, and as the Prophet ﷺ taught, don't be afraid. If you're doing that, Allah will make a way, as He most surely does. And any one of us can testify to that, that at a time when we thought everything was going to go wrong, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His mercy and His sublimeness, He granted us a way out, either individually or collectively. And so we have to pay attention to this. It's a bad thing, in one sense, as we see it, that that George Floyd died in the manner that he died. But in another sense, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because nothing happens out of the scope of His qadr, for whatever reasons, in one sense, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed him to lose his life that way, Allah is best to know. But it drew exact attention to the evilness, one of the great evilness of this society. And now the question becomes, what do we as Muslims do? How do we speak out against it? How do we mobilize ourselves? Because again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has characterized us as being the best ummah drawn from mankind, because we enjoin the right and forbid the wrong. And we seek taqwa, fearing Him as He should be feared, loving Him above all and anything else, and loving Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam above all except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself. This is His ummah. This is the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And again, if we look from a historical perspective, look what they accomplished when they did that. This is the example that we have. So the question becomes, do we really believe and see ourselves as being the best that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has brought from mankind because of our testifying our belief in Him? Do we really believe this? Do we really see it? Do we feel it? Is it in our hearts? Or is it something that simply comes off our tongues? It sounds good. But do we really believe it? Because before we go nationally, and we don't have the benefit of being able to take the time, some things have to be done simultaneously. Do we really believe it when it comes to looking at the Jumu'ah of Masjidun-Nur and what we need to be about accomplishing. Because if we truly believe that we are the best to be brought for mankind because of our willingness to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our willingness to follow the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to love each other for no other reason except his sake, to live each day as best we can, seeking Allah's pleasure and drawing closer to him, then what we need to accomplish in our Jumu'ah of Masjidun-Nur becomes an easy thing to do, and we make it difficult. Pretty plain in terms of that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he is always there. I looked at, as you did probably, and seeing all these people pouring out into the street, doing whatever, not meaning in a bad way, the people that were demonstrating. And I looked at the people who were looting. One of the things that I saw in looking at that happened in Philadelphia, I'm not going to say that the woman that I saw going into the store that she came out with that was being looted, and she came out with boxes of sneakers, was Muslim, but she was dressed as a Muslim. And I will leave it at that. Allah is best to know whether she was or she was not. But if she was, and that was the example that she gave, how terrible was that? Because no matter how hard it gets, we, in being Muslim, have to adhere to what we know to be the truth. That's what we have to do. I'm not saying that we should not have anger. And I'm not saying that we should not be upset, because what we witnessed, and not only because what we witnessed, but because what we have experienced. Because our being Muslim does not take us out of the circumstance of being of African descent. It doesn't. And there's nothing in Islam, as far as I know, and Allah knows best, that we have to turn our backs on the fact that we are. On the other side is that Allah gives us the proper circumstance and how we should be and how we should look at who we are. Because he, for whatever reason he chose, has described those who attest belief in him, who work to enjoin the right and forbid the wrong, no matter what their color, are the best drawn from mankind. And this is what we have to be aware of. And to show you what I'm talking about, in one sense, there's a hadith, and the Prophet ﷺ, he sent a person to the Jews of Al-Khaybar to collect the taxes on the fruit that they had raised. And the person that he sent, when he got there, they tried to bribe him. They said, we'll give you such and such and such and such if you don't tax us the full amount. The brother's name was Abdul-Ahad. And this is what he said to them. He said, I love the person who has sent me as being the best of all mankind, the best ever person ever created, in Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he also said to them, and I hate you as much as twice the number of apes and pigs, swine, that you could represent. But then he said this. He said, but no matter how much I love the Prophet ﷺ and I hate you, I will do that which is just and right because of my fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is where we have to be. This is where we have to be. So even in this circumstance, this Sahaba, he was perfectly honest. I love the Prophet Saiful-Islam more than any human being ever. He's the best to ever be created. And then he talked about his hatred of them. And then said, but neither one of these will I use to be less than just to you. The Jews of Al-Khaybar who approached Abdul-Razak and tried to get him to give up and take a bribe, they actually recanted and said, indeed, this is justice. And then they said something else, that sometimes when we see all of the fitna and the turmoil that takes place, they said, indeed, the earth and everything in it was created in justice and righteousness by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is where we have to be. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله وأتوب إليه أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له أشهد أن محمد عبده ورسوله. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala khairil mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. The other reason in looking at Masjidun-Nur, our Jumu'ah, our community, and the other things that have transpired, but where we live, because the things that you accomplished before I ever came to Camden and becoming a part of the community, I heard things about what you did, what you accomplished. A school, a restaurant, barbershop, activity in the community, children being raised up in the masjid. All of those things that signify a community in the real terms of what a community is and should be. And just as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed you all to have it then, He can bless us to have it now, but it takes an effort on our part to do so. We see the turmoil in the streets. We see the circumstances that takes place. I mean, even myself, one morning going to school, I was pulled over by a Camden policeman simply because on the way to the high, I went around him because he had stopped. And when I figured out that he was following me, I pulled over right by the Rite Aid at the intersection of Atlantic and Hattonfield Avenue. And this policeman comes up to me, introduces himself, young white officer, and then proceeded to ask me, why did I go around him? And my reply was, you were stopped. You didn't have your hazard lights on, you stopped, put your vehicle in park. I put on my left turn signal, went around you. Once I made sure the lane was clear, I stopped at the red light at the intersection, and when it turned green, proceeded it through. I said, so are you telling me that there's a law that says when you stop and put your car in park, that I can't go around you until you decide to move? And he was quiet. So then, well, let me see your license and registration. No problem. Where are you going? On my way to work. Where do you work? Camden High. Then it was, give me my license and my registration back. And then the only thing he could say, one of your brake lights is out, make sure you get it fixed. Alhamdulillah, it ended that way. But we know so many other circumstances that it didn't. But I do know from what I've heard from others, not individuals who knew of you all at 910 Broadway, they talked about the fact of what it meant to see you all do the things, those of you who were there before I got here, in your lives, to see the things that you did and the difference that it made in Camden. And now we have the opportunity again in light of the circumstances that have taken place. The Prophet ﷺ gave a hadith that's both in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. And in that hadith, he talks about the fact in looking at the Muslim Ummah. And he says this. He says, we Muslims will be the last to come on Yom Al-Qiyamah, not because we've done anything wrong, but because we were to receive the last revelation of the Quran. And then he said, but we will be the first, through Allah's grace and mercy, to enter paradise because of our willingness to follow the Quran, enjoin the right and forbid the wrong, for no other reason except pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In another hadith recorded by Imam Ahmed from Abu Hurairah, the Prophet ﷺ said to the companions that were gathered there, he asked them, how much would you like to be a quarter of the people of paradise? And it's related that they said, Allahu Akbar. And then he asked them, how much would you like to be a third of the denizens of paradise? And again, they said, Allahu Akbar. And then he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, I hope that you will be half of the denizens of paradise. And they said, Allahu Akbar once again. But then he also talked about what it takes to be that. And again, it's our recognition of what we bring to the table as being described by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the best of mankind to be brought forth. Not because of the color of our skin, the color of our eyes, how much wealth we have, or how poor we are, but because we enjoin the right and forbid the wrong upon ourselves, upon each other, for no other reason except for the pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and on those around us. Opportunity here for Muslims throughout the world to set the example of why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about us that we're the best to be brought for mankind. And we have to truly believe that we are. Not out of arrogance. Is there some pride there? Yes. But it's a pride about being brought by Allah to the truth. Because in the ayats that he speaks about the aspect of the Surah Al-Hujurat and elsewhere about the Jews and the Christians having had their chance, the end of that ayat, he says, indeed, most of them are fasiqun. Indeed, most of them have gone away from the truth. We can't be that way. Locally, nationally, internationally, as best as we can, we have to show that we are the best that have been brought from mankind in what we do. And being able to aid and assist in the truth. But even before that, and I'll pray that I'm not being selfish here, but even before that, that we do what we know it is, we have to do in our Jumu'ah. We don't know when this pandemic is going to end. Allah is best to know. All we do know that the Prophet ﷺ taught us that indeed Allah created every disease, and for every disease he created a cure. Nothing happens outside of that scope. Which means to say to us what? We have to continue to enjoin the right and forbid the wrong. We have to continue to love each other for Allah's sake, first and foremost. And we have to show the world that indeed we are the best brought forth for mankind. Not because we say that we are, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are. It is up to us to let them know that they have the ability to have that designation as well. If they're willing to say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, and live their lives according to that covenant with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can show that we are the best of mankind. We can show in Camden, with Masjidun-Nur, our Jumu'ah, that we are that by setting an example of what and how it should be, as was done before. And for me, I have nothing else to say except that for what those of you who were then there that were blessed to accomplish, you were blessed to accomplish it because you did it with the understanding of enjoining the right and forbidding the wrong, and doing it for seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا وأخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملنا من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا قوم الكافرين. Dear Muslims, Jazakallah khair for listening to me. Again, if any mistakes that I made, they are from me. And anything that I said that is correct was from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.